It was my first semester of college, and I was drowning in loneliness. I'd see groups of people laughing on the quad, spilling out of dorm rooms, and I just couldn't figure out how to be one of them. My social anxiety was a physical wall I carried around with me. So when a girl from my English class, Chloe, invited me to a rave, I said yes instantly. I thought this was my chance, my way in. The second I walked into the warehouse, I knew I'd made a mistake. The bass was a physical force, hitting my chest with every beat. The air was thick with sweat and smoke, and strobing lights made it impossible to focus on anything. Chloe's friends were all there, moving as one entity in the middle of the crowd. They were vibrant and loud and beautiful, and I was just there, standing awkwardly at the edge, trying to look like I belonged. They'd shout something to me over the music. I'd nod and smile, but I couldn't hear a word. I felt more alone in that crush of bodies than I ever did in my empty dorm room. That's when Leo found me. He was part of the group, someone I'd met once. He had this easy smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. He leaned in, his mouth close to my ear so I could hear him over the music. He said, "You look like you're not feeling it." I just shook my head. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small plastic bag with a single capsule inside. "This will help," he shouted. "It's pure MDMA. Think of it as a shortcut to empathy and connection. You'll get on their level instantly." I knew I shouldn't. My mind was screaming all the reasons why it was a terrible idea. But all I could see were Chloe and her friends, laughing, connected. I wanted that more than anything. I nodded. He poured the capsule into my hand, and I swallowed it dry. I just wanted to feel like I belonged. I had no idea that I was about to lose myself completely. I stood there for a few minutes, waiting. I kept my eyes on Chloe and her friends, trying to imagine myself feeling what they felt. I pictured a warm wave washing over me, the anxiety melting away, the music suddenly making sense. Leo said it was a shortcut, and I was just waiting for it to finally unlock the door. Then it hit me, but it wasn't a warm wave. It was a jolt, like sticking a fork in an electrical socket. A buzzing energy shot up my spine and into my jaw, making my teeth ache. I could feel my own heart hammering against my ribs, way faster than the beat of the music. A metallic taste filled my mouth. This wasn't empathy. This was something else, something jagged and wrong. The music changed. It was like a switch had been flipped in my brain. A second before, it was just loud techno. But now every hi-hat sounded like shattering glass, every bass drop like a physical blow to the head. The synths were sharp and screeching, drilling into my ears. It felt aggressive. It felt like it was pointed at me. I looked back at the group. Chloe was laughing, her head thrown back. But her laugh didn't look joyful anymore. It looked like a sneer. The guy next to her whispered something in her ear, and they both glanced my way. I was sure of it. They were laughing at me. They could see the drug wasn't working right. They could see I was a fraud. I thought to myself, they set me up. This whole thing was a joke. My whole body was buzzing with a horrible, frantic energy. I needed to move, but I was frozen to the spot. The colorful lights were too bright, burning my eyes. The smiling faces in the crowd looked like masks, all hiding a secret cruelty. All I wanted was to connect. But now I felt like every single person in that warehouse was an enemy. I had to get out. I had to get out, but my feet felt bolted to the floor. I finally managed to turn away from the group, from Chloe's mocking laugh. My eyes scanned the warehouse, desperate for an exit, but all I saw was a sea of faces turned towards me. Or at least, It felt that way. The DJ was up on a platform, a silhouette against the blinding lights. I could have sworn he was looking right at me. He twisted a knob, and a high-pitched siren sound ripped through the air, perfectly timed to the panic spiking in my chest. It was a signal. He was part of it. Then it all clicked into place with a horrifying, crystalline clarity. My whole body was vibrating. My jaw was clamped so tight I could feel my teeth grinding. This wasn't the warm empathy of MDMA. I remembered reading about drugs online, about the jagged, paranoid energy of something else. This was meth. He gave me methamphetamine, and he didn't do it by accident. I looked back over my shoulder at Leo. His easy smile was gone. In its place was a cold, calculating look. He was watching me. He and Chloe and all of them, they weren't dancing anymore. They were just standing there, observing me like scientists watching a lab rat. Their movements from before didn't look natural now. They looked rehearsed. They were actors. All of them. I thought to myself, this whole thing is a prank. The warehouse wasn't a rave, it was a soundstage. They had brought me here to humiliate me. The loneliness I walked in with was the setup, and this drug-fueled breakdown was the punchline. Every person here was an audience member, and Leo was the director of my own personal horror movie. That thought finally broke my paralysis. I shoved myself into the dancing crowd, trying to get to the back wall where I thought I'd seen an exit. Every shoulder I bumped, every body I pushed past, felt like an obstacle placed there on purpose. People turned to look at me, their faces distorting in the strobe lights. A girl with glitter on her cheeks smiled, but her eyes were empty, like a doll's. A guy reached out a hand, and I flinched back, sure he was one of them, a sign to stop me from leaving. The bass of the music was a countdown to my final humiliation. I could feel hundreds of eyes on my back. My heart was a wild animal trying to beat its way out of my chest. I wasn't just in a crowd, I was on display. And I knew if I didn't escape, I was going to come apart completely, right there in the middle of their cruel, perfect show. I finally broke through the thickest part of the crowd and saw it. An open door, spilling cool, dark air into the hot, suffocating warehouse. A few people were standing there smoking, their silhouettes black against the night sky. Freedom. It was maybe 20 feet away. I fixed my eyes on it and stumbled forward, pushing past the last few dancers. Just as I was about to burst through the doorway, a hand clamped down on my arm. It was ice cold, or maybe my skin was just on fire. A fresh wave of sheer terror shot through me. I didn't even have to look. I knew it was him. My head snapped around, and my eyes met Leo's. He was leaning in close, his face creased with what was probably supposed to be concern. But in the strobing light, his features looked demonic. His eyes were black pits. He shouted something at me, but the ringing in my ears distorted his words into a low, guttural threat. All I could make out was my name. He was the ringleader. He couldn't let me escape. He couldn't let his main attraction walk off the set. He was trying to drag me back to the center of the floor, back to my public humiliation. That's when I completely lost it. I screamed, a raw animal sound that cut through the music. "Get off me!" I wrenched my arm free and shoved him with all the strength in my body. He stumbled backward into a couple of people, his face a mask of shock. "I know what you did!" I shrieked at him, pointing. The people around us had stopped dancing. They were all staring now, their faces turning towards me. The show had finally reached its climax. "I know what this is. All of you. You're all a part of it." Leo just stood there, looking stunned, Chloe and her friends were a few feet behind him, their smiles gone, replaced with wide-eyed confusion. To me, it wasn't confusion. It was the anger of a mastermind whose perfect prank had just been exposed. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I turned and sprinted through the doorway, past the smokers who dropped their cigarettes to watch me go. The cold night air hit me like a physical slap. The bass from inside was a dull, muffled thud behind me. I didn't stop. I ran down the empty industrial street, my own ragged breathing the only thing I could hear. I came here because I was terrified of being alone. And now I was running into the darkness, completely convinced that every single person I'd wanted to know was part of a plot to destroy me. I don't remember running back to my dorm. I remember the cold air burning my lungs and the sound of my own footsteps echoing on the pavement. I remember a terror so complete that it felt like an engine inside me, driving me forward. The next thing I knew, I was on the floor inside my room, with the door locked and the deadbolt thrown. My whole body was shaking so hard my teeth chattered. The next day, I didn't go to class. I didn't leave my bed. My phone would buzz on the desk, and every time, a jolt of pure fear went through me. I was certain it was Leo or Chloe, texting to taunt me. I imagined messages like, "Hope you had fun," or "Great performance last night." I unplugged the phone's charger and let the battery die. A couple of days went by in a blur of half-eaten protein bars and tap water. I finally had to leave to go to the shared bathroom down the hall. I peeked out my door first, making sure no one was there. On my way back, I saw Chloe coming around the corner. She saw me. Her face registered surprise, and then she opened her mouth to say something. I didn't wait to hear it. I panicked. I just bolted back into my room and slammed the door, my heart pounding in my ears. I leaned against the door, listening. I could hear her stop outside for a second, then walk away. For the rest of the day, I was convinced she was going to come back with the others to finish whatever they started. That was the moment everything changed for good. The social anxiety I'd had before felt like a minor inconvenience compared to this. This was a different beast entirely. Before, I was afraid of being awkward or saying the wrong thing. Now, I was afraid of people. All of them. Every stranger I saw on the quad was a potential actor from that night. Every laugh I heard from another room was directed at me. I came to college desperate to connect with someone. I swallowed that capsule because I thought it would be a shortcut to belonging. Instead, it was a shortcut to a prison I built for myself. My quest to cure my loneliness had, in one night, twisted my anxiety into a crippling phobia. I wasn't just alone in my room anymore. I was in solitary confinement. I was a straight-A student, pre-med. My entire life had been a carefully constructed tower of good grades, late-night study sessions, and extracurriculars. The plan was flawless. My organic chemistry final was in 2 days, and it counted for 40% of my grade. My future pretty much depended on acing it. Then the pain started. It began as a dull throb in my back molar, the kind you can almost ignore. But within hours, it ramped up into something else entirely. It was a sharp, electric, white-hot spike that shot from my jaw straight into my skull every time I moved. Even breathing felt like it was triggering it. The constant, throbbing ache underneath it all made it impossible to think, let alone memorize complex chemical reactions. I spent the entire next morning on the phone. I called every dentist within a 20-mile radius of campus. The first receptionist told me their next opening was in 3 weeks. The second one laughed and said they were booked solid. A third one told me to go to the emergency room if it was really that bad. I knew what the ER would do. They'd make me wait for 6 hours, charge me a fortune, and then give me a prescription for 800 motor ibuprofen. That wasn't going to cut it. I tried to study. I really did. I sat in the library with my textbook open, but the words just swam in a blurry haze. The pain was like a loud screaming in my head that drowned out everything else. I felt a surge of pure panic. My whole future, everything I had worked for, was about to be destroyed by a single rotting tooth. I slammed the book shut. I couldn't fail this test. I couldn't let it happen. The proper channels weren't going to help me in time. I was completely and utterly desperate. I needed something to kill the pain. Just for a day or two. Just long enough to get through the exam. I pulled out my phone, but I wasn't looking for dentists anymore. I needed a different kind of solution, a quick one. I scrolled through my phone, my thumb shaking. My contacts list was a useless collection of family, old high school friends, and a few people from my classes I barely knew. Who would have something for this? Who could I even ask without sounding like a fiend? Then I saw a name. Mark. He was my lab partner in OChem. He was smart, but he was also the kind of guy who disappeared for long weekends and came back looking exhausted. He sometimes made jokes about his extracurriculars. It was a long shot, but it was my only shot. I sent him a text. Hey man, random question. I'm in a really bad way, got an insane toothache, and the final is tomorrow. Can't get a dentist. You don't know anyone or anything that could help, do you? It felt pathetic just to type it. He replied in less than a minute. Damn, that sucks. Yeah, I might have something. Meet me behind the science building in 10. I was there in 5. The pain was so bad now, I was starting to feel nauseous. When Mark showed up, I didn't waste time with small talk. I just told him how desperate I was, how my entire grade was on the line. He just nodded, looking sympathetic. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a standard orange prescription bottle. It had a real pharmacy label on it, his name right there. I've got one left from when I had my wisdom teeth out, he said. It's a Percocet. This will kill it for sure. He shook a small, round white pill into his palm and then tipped it into mine. It looked completely normal. It looked like medicine. I felt a wave of relief so powerful it almost made my knees buckle. Thank you, I said. Seriously, man, you have no idea. You just saved my life. He just shrugged. No problem. Good luck on the final. I walked back towards my dorm, clutching the pill in my hand like it was a winning lottery ticket. All I could think was that I could finally make the pain stop. I could study. I could pass my test. This little pill was the answer to everything. The second I was back in my room, I didn't even make it to my desk. I locked the door and grabbed my water bottle, my hands shaking with a mix of pain and anticipation. I tossed the small white pill to the back of my throat and took a huge swallow of water. I sat on the edge of my bed and closed my eyes, just waiting. Waiting for the throbbing in my jaw to finally disappear. It happened in seconds. This wasn't the slow, a warm dissolving of pain I expected. It was like a switch was flipped off in my brain. An immense, crushing weight slammed into me, instantly erasing the toothache. But it didn't stop there. It erased everything else, too. A wave of sedation, so powerful it felt like being drowned in syrup, washed through my whole body. My limbs turned to lead. My head felt too heavy for my neck. I remember thinking, this isn't what a painkiller feels like. This is something else. I tried to take a deep breath, but I couldn't. It felt like my lungs were trapped in a vice. Each inhale was short, shallow, and useless. A tiny fizz of panic started in my chest. a desperate signal that my body was starving for air. But the sedation was like a concrete blanket, holding me down, smothering the alarm bells before they could even ring. My vision began to shrink. The edges of my room turned dark and blurry, closing in until all I could see was a small circle of light, like looking through a long, black tunnel. I knew I was in trouble. I tried to move my arm, to push myself up, to crawl to the door. I told my hand to lift, but it just lay there, unresponsive. I tried to open my mouth to scream for help, but my jaw was locked and my throat wouldn't work. I was completely, utterly paralyzed. I was a mind trapped in a body that was shutting down. And in that moment of pure, silent horror, I finally understood. This wasn't a Percocet. I'd seen the warnings, I'd read the articles about counterfeit pills. It all clicked with terrible clarity. That pill Mark gave me was a fake, and that overwhelming wave wasn't medicine. It was a hotspot, a tiny, concentrated speck of fentanyl that was now stopping my heart. I was on my way to the library. The organic chemistry final was the next morning, and I was going to ask him if he wanted to cram for a few hours. I knocked on his door, but there was no answer. I knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. That wasn't like him, especially not the night before a huge exam. I turned the knob. It was unlocked. I pushed the door open a few inches and called his name. Silence. A weird, cold feeling washed over me. I pushed the door all the way open. He was on the floor, next to his bed. For a second, my brain tried to tell me he was just sleeping in a weird position. He was half curled up, his head turned towards me. But his face was blue. A weird, dusky, purplish blue color I'd never seen on a living person before. His lips were almost black. I rushed over and grabbed his shoulder. Hey man, wake up!" His body was completely limp. I put my ear next to his mouth, desperately trying to feel or hear anything. Nothing. His chest wasn't moving. My heart just dropped into my stomach. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock my phone. I finally got it open and dialed 911. A calm voice came on the line and I just started screaming. "My roommate isn't breathing. He's on the floor and he's blue." The dispatcher asked if he was conscious. "No, I don't think he's breathing at all." She asked if he'd taken something, if there were any pill bottles. I frantically looked around his desk, seeing only his OChem textbook. "I don't know. I don't see anything. Just please send someone." It felt like an eternity, but it must have only been a few minutes before 2 paramedics burst through the door. They didn't even speak to me. They took one look at him and were instantly in motion. One of them knelt down and tilted his head back. The other pulled out a small plastic device with a plunger on the end. He stuck the nozzle into my roommate's nostril and pushed the plunger. Then he did the same thing in the other one. They waited. The room was dead silent except for the squawk of their radio. Nothing happened. It felt like minutes were ticking by. One of the paramedics pulled out a mask and was about to put it on his face when it happened. A sound, a huge, ragged, gasping breath that sounded like a drowning man breaking the surface of the water. His entire body convulsed with the force of it. He choked and gasped again, and his eyes flew open. They were wide with pure animal terror. The disgusting blue color started to drain from his face, replaced by a deathly pale. He was alive. He looked right past me, his eyes unfocused, like he had no idea where he was or what had just happened. I remember the gasping. That's the first thing. A sound like an engine trying to start, and realizing it was coming from my own throat. My entire body felt like it had been struck by lightning. There were faces over me, people in uniform. I saw their mouths moving, but I couldn't understand what they were saying. It was all a muffled roar, like I was still underwater. Bits and pieces come back after that. The ceiling of an ambulance, the blinding lights of the emergency room. A nurse trying to talk to me, her voice patient and slow. She asked me my name. I knew it. It was in my head, a simple fact. But when I tried to say it, the word got stuck somewhere between my brain and my mouth. A garbled sound came out instead. She asked me to touch my nose with my finger. I focused all my energy on my right hand. I watched it shake, a tremor I couldn't control, as it slowly, clumsily made its way towards my face. I missed. A doctor came and explained it to my parents. I sat there, listening, but it felt like he was talking about someone else. The words he used were clinical and cold. Anoxic brain injury, prolonged lack of oxygen. He said that even though the paramedics had restarted my heart, there was a period where my brain had been starved. He spoke about permanent cognitive deficits and motor skill impairment. I was revived, but the me that I knew was gone. And the straight-A pre-med student who could memorize 100 chemical formulas, he died on the floor of that dorm room. All I wanted was to get through an exam. I was so desperate to save my future that I destroyed it. All of it, every plan, every dream, just completely erased by one little white pill. I didn't call it an addiction. I called it a competitive advantage. I worked in investment banking on a team that lived and died by 100-hour work weeks. Sleep was a weakness. Your edge was everything. And while the analysts next to me were chugging espresso and popping their Adderall prescriptions, I had a different tool in my kit. I had rules. I never bought cheap. For me, it was only the top shelf, pearlescent product that my guys swore was straight off the brick. The kind that made your whole face numb. I told myself it was clean. It was a quality control issue. You don't put cheap gas in a Ferrari, and my mind was my Ferrari. This wasn't about getting high. It was about getting sharp. It was fuel. The ritual was my secret. A small key bump in the bathroom before a big presentation. A thin, perfect line chopped on the cool marble of my kitchen island before heading back to the office for an all-nighter. There wasn't any frantic energy or paranoia. Just a cool, clean wave of absolute focus. The numbers on the spreadsheet would snap into place. The words for the pitch deck would just flow. I felt invincible, smarter, and faster than everyone else in the room. It was my superpower. It was a status symbol I kept to myself. Functional, professional grade. And for a while, it worked flawlessly. I honestly couldn't imagine getting by without it. That was the first mistake. It started a few months later. I thought it was a pimple on the rim of my ear, a small reddish spot. I figured I'd just leave it alone and it would go away. But it didn't. Instead of healing, it darkened. It turned into a tiny black scab, hard to the touch. It didn't hurt, but it looked ugly, and it wasn't going away. Then a second one appeared on my other ear, and a third started forming on the bridge of my nose. These weren't like the first one. They ached. It was a deep, burning pain, like a bruise that was constantly being pressed. I started feeling sick all the time, too. Not a head cold, but a deep, systemic exhaustion. I had a low-grade fever that wouldn't break. I'd sleep for 9 hours and wake up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. My superpower was gone. The focus, the sharpness, It was all being replaced by a foggy, painful haze. I finally went to a dermatologist. He squinted at my face, looked at my ears with a magnifying glass, and said it was probably a bacterial infection. He prescribed a powerful antibiotic cream and told me to come back in 2 weeks. I used the cream religiously, but it did nothing. The sores got worse. The black scabs grew larger, and the skin around them turned a painful-looking purple. So I went to another doctor, an internist. He was more concerned. He ordered a battery of tests. They drew vials of my blood, testing me for everything they could think of. Autoimmune diseases, rare fungal infections, MRSA. A week later, he called me. Everything was negative. Every single test came back clean. The doctor sounded completely stumped. He just said, "I have no idea what this is." He referred me to an infectious disease specialist. I looked at myself in the mirror that night. The sores on my face and ears were impossible to ignore. They were like black coins embedded in my skin. The man who saw his mind as a Ferrari just a few months ago was gone. In his place was a sick person, some kind of medical mystery. And the worst part was, nobody had any answers. I just kept getting sicker, and the smartest people in the world just shrugged their shoulders. I was completely on my own. I went back to the same dermatologist a few weeks later. The sores were worse. The black scabs on my ears had grown, and the one on my nose was now a deep, angry purple. The burning was constant. I felt sick and tired all the time, and I was starting to get scared. He looked at my file, then at my face. He shook his head. He told me the antibiotic cream obviously wasn't working, and he reread the negative results from all my blood tests out loud, as if the paper might have changed since he last looked at it. He sounded defeated. He was about to tell me he was referring me to someone else. I could just feel it. Another dead end. I was getting angry. This was the third doctor who had no idea what was wrong with me. I was paying for these visits just to be told that nobody had any answers. But then he stopped. He leaned in close to my face again, his brow furrowed. He wasn't just looking at the sores anymore. He was looking at the specific places they were appearing. He gently touched the tip of my nose, then the cartilage on the rim of my ear. The room was quiet. The clinical, detached look on his face shifted into something else. It was like a puzzle piece had just clicked into place for him. He pulled back and looked me straight in the eye. His voice was flat with no judgment at all. It was just a simple, clinical question. Do you use cocaine? The question just hung there in the sterile air of the exam room. Do you use cocaine? My whole body went cold. My first instinct, the one that had carried me through my entire career, was to lie, to deny it, to act insulted. Because admitting it meant admitting I wasn't in control. But I was so tired. I was tired of being sick, tired of going to doctors, and tired of pretending. The lie just wouldn't form on my lips. I looked at the black sores on my skin, and for the first time, I saw them as part of a story I hadn't been telling anyone. I just nodded. My throat was too tight to speak. Then I managed a single word. Yes. He didn't flinch. He didn't judge me. He just nodded like I had confirmed a simple fact. He told me that he'd seen this before. The location of the sores, on the ears and nose, was a classic sign. He said it was caused by a specific cutting agent, levamisole, a deworming medicine used for cattle and pigs. I just stared at him. The top-shelf product, the pure fuel. My guy swore it was straight off the brick. All this time, I had been paying a premium to snort cow dewormer. A wave of humiliation and disgust washed over me. Then he explained what it does. He said in some people, Levamisole triggers a powerful autoimmune response. He put it in simple terms that I could not misunderstand. He said, "Your own immune system starts attacking the small blood vessels in your skin. Your body has been programmed to kill its own tissue." He pointed at my ear. "That's what these are," he said. "It's not an infection, it's necrosis. It's dead skin. Your body is doing this to itself." He ordered one more blood test, a specific one to check for the antibodies this reaction produces. The wait was a special kind of hell. A few days later, his office called. The test was positive. There was no doubt anymore. My competitive advantage, my secret superpower, the fuel for my Ferrari brain. It was poison. And it had taught my own body how to destroy itself from the inside out. The doctor was blunt. There was no real treatment other than to stop using cocaine immediately and forever. He said if I stopped, my immune system might calm down. The process might halt. But the damage that had already been done was permanent. The necrosis was irreversible. I stopped. Completely. The constant sickness faded after a few weeks. The exhaustion lifted. But the sores on my face and ears didn't just disappear. Over a month or so, the hard black scabs flaked off. It wasn't a relief. Underneath, the skin was wrong. It was pale, thin, and sunken in. I was left with scars. A small, shallow crater on the bridge of my nose. The cartilage on the tops of my ears looks permanently dented, almost like they were burned. They aren't huge, but they are impossible to miss if you're looking at me. They are a permanent part of my face now. I used to think the cocaine made me look better, more confident, sharper, more successful. I took it so I could be the invincible man in the $1,000 suit. I thought it was a tool to build an image of power. The irony is so thick it suffocates me. The very substance I used to project success and perfection has now permanently branded me. It gave me a physical stamp of sickness, a visible mark of my addiction. It's the first thing people see. I wanted to be a Ferrari, but I ended up with a salvage title, branded on my own skin. There were 5 of us, and we were a unit. We'd known each other since middle school, and that summer after our first year of college felt like a homecoming. We picked up right where we left off, spending our nights in my parents' basement making plans. The big one was a camping trip. We wanted to go somewhere properly remote, somewhere with no cell service, just us and a fire under the stars. It was our friend, Kevin, who first brought up the idea. He said we should do it right, make it a real experience, a rite of passage. He meant we should take acid. None of us had done it before. Not really. We'd all talked about it, read about it online. But the idea of actually doing it was this big, mythical thing. A camping trip, away from everyone and everything, felt like the perfect setting. A safe container for our first psychedelic journey together. Kevin immediately took charge. He was always that guy in our group. He'd read a few articles, and suddenly he was an expert on everything. He was the most experienced, having tried mushrooms once, and he carried that knowledge like a badge of honor. He told us not to worry, that he'd handle sourcing it. He said you couldn't trust street-level stuff. He was going to get us the good stuff, the pure stuff. A week before the trip, he gathered us in the basement. He had this huge, self-satisfied grin on his face. He pulled a tiny plastic baggie out of his pocket. Inside were 5 small squares of blotter paper with a simple geometric design on them. He said he'd gotten them off the darknet. He called it high-quality LSD and told us it was from a really reputable vendor. He seemed so proud of himself. He kept talking about how easy it was and how he'd found an amazing price on it. He said, "You wouldn't believe the deal I got on this stuff." We were all just excited. We didn't question it. We had our sacrament for the woods. We trusted him completely. The day of the trip came. We drove for hours until the pavement turned to dirt and the cell service vanished completely. It was perfect. We found a clearing in the woods, set up our one big tent, and got a fire going as the sun started to drop behind the trees. The mood was electric. We were all giddy, a little nervous, but mostly just excited to finally be doing this. Kevin waited until the fire was crackling and the sky was turning purple. He gathered us around in a little circle. He pulled out the baggie with that same self-satisfied look on his face. "All right," he said. "Are we ready to do this?" He handed each of us one of the little paper squares. We looked at each other, grinning like idiots. On the count of 3, we all placed the tabs on our tongues. Instantly, my whole mouth was flooded with a horrible taste. It was intensely bitter. Not just a little bit, but a powerful chemical bitterness that made me want to spit it out. A metallic tang followed right behind it, like sucking on a battery. I looked over at my friend Dave, and I could see him grimacing. I glanced at Kevin, who was trying to pretend he didn't taste anything, but his eyes were wide. This wasn't right. We'd all read the guides online. LSD was supposed to be tasteless. Before I could even process the taste, a different sensation started. It wasn't a gentle wave of euphoria or a slow shift in perception. It was a jarring, physical buzz that felt completely synthetic. It felt like my whole nervous system was being plugged into a faulty electrical socket. A strange, uncomfortable energy started crawling up my spine, and my jaw began to clamp down so hard it ached. My stomach churned. This wasn't psychedelic. This wasn't mystical. This was a body load, a heavy, unpleasant, full-body poisoning. I know now what those signs meant. The bitter, metallic taste, that jarring, vasoconstricting body load. Those are the classic calling cards of a research chemical, something dangerous like 25I-NBM. Not the pure LSD Kevin had promised us. Not the sacrament for our trip. We'd been sold poison. And we were hours from civilization, with no way to call for help, just as it was starting to take hold. The buzzing energy in my limbs was getting worse, turning into a painful pins and needles sensation that made me want to tear my skin off. I looked around the fire. Everyone's face was slick with sweat, even though the night air was getting cold. We were all fidgeting, grinding our jaws, trapped in the same horrible, vibrating prison. The easy laughter from an hour ago was gone, replaced by a tense, suffocating silence. Then Dave shot to his feet. His eyes were wide with terror. I can't breathe," he stammered, clutching at his chest. "It feels like my heart is going to explode." Kevin, the expert, scrambled over to him. "Just breathe, man," Kevin said. But his voice was shaking. His own face was white as a sheet. "It's just a bad trip. You just have to ride it out." He put a hand on Dave's shoulder, but Dave violently shrugged it off. "No, something's wrong," Dave gasped. His breath was coming in short, wet rasps. He looked at us, his eyes pleading, like he was searching for an answer we didn't have. "My chest." He didn't finish the sentence. He let out a sharp cry, a choked, animal sound of pure agony. His eyes rolled back into his head, and his whole body went rigid. And then he just collapsed, falling sideways and hitting the hard dirt with a sickening thud. For a second, there was just silence. Then his body started to convulse. It was more violent than anything I could have ever imagined. his back arched off the ground, his arms and legs flailing and slamming against the dirt. A thick, white foam started bubbling from his lips. His jaw was clenched so tight, we could hear his teeth grinding together over the crackle of the fire. All we could do was watch, frozen in complete and utter horror, as our friend thrashed and choked in the dirt, miles away from any help. We were just frozen. All four of us stood there, staring down at Dave, and my brain just completely short-circuited. The only things that were real were the crackling of the fire and the horrifying sounds coming from our friend. It was a wet, choked, gurgling noise, mixed with a loud, rhythmic grinding. It was the sound of his teeth trying to shatter each other in his jaw. His whole body was a taut, rigid bow, arching off the ground and then slamming back down over and over. "Do something!" One of our friends, Mike, finally screamed. The words broke the spell. Kevin, our supposed expert, stumbled forward. We have to roll him on his side," he stammered, his voice thin and reedy. He sounded like a little kid. We all rushed in, clumsy and terrified. I grabbed Dave's shoulder, and it felt like grabbing a block of vibrating concrete. We tried to turn him, but his body was flailing with so much strength, so much uncontrollable violence, that he just thrashed out of our grip. It was in that moment, as Dave slammed back onto the dirt, that the full weight of our situation crushed me. I remember thinking, we need to call an ambulance. It was an automatic thought, a basic instinct. I fumbled for my phone in my pocket and ripped it out. The screen lit up my panicked face. No service. Just those two words, glowing under the dark, empty forest canopy. I looked up and saw Mike holding his phone too, with the same look of dawning, absolute horror on his face. The freedom we had wanted, the escape from everything, had just turned into a trap. We were hours from anything. No cars would be coming down this dirt road. No one in the entire world knew where we were. We had nothing. There was no one to call. There was no help coming. All we could do was kneel there in the dirt, completely powerless, and watch our friend convulse in the firelight, praying to a God none of us believed in, that he wouldn't die right there in front of us. The convulsions finally stopped. It was as sudden and shocking as when they had started. One moment, Dave's body was a violent, arching thing, and the next, he was just limp in the dirt. A thick white foam bubbled around his mouth, and his breathing was a faint, shallow rattle. The silence that fell was more terrifying than the seizure itself. We looked at each other, our faces illuminated by the firelight, all of us sharing the same hollowed-out expression of pure horror. Kevin was sobbing, quiet, choking sounds. Nobody said a word. We didn't have to. We just knew we had to carry him. We linked our arms under his back and legs and lifted. He was a dead weight. We stumbled through the pitch-black woods, tripping on roots, the branches of trees whipping at our faces. The only sound was our frantic breathing and the horrible, quiet rasp coming from Dave's chest. It took forever to get him to the car. We shoved him into the back seat and flew down the dirt roads, the car bottoming out over and over. Mike drove while the rest of us were in the back with Dave, just watching him, touching his face, trying to see if he was still breathing in the dark. We finally hit pavement and a cell signal. We screamed at the 911 operator and met an ambulance at a gas station 20 minutes later. They took him, and we just followed the lights. Numb. Dave survived. That's what the doctor told us in the sterile, fluorescent-lit waiting room hours later. He survived, but a prolonged seizure starves the brain of oxygen. The doctor talked about cognitive impairment, memory loss, and motor skill damage. He used the words permanent brain injury. When we finally saw Dave, he was awake, but his eyes were vacant. He looked at us but didn't seem to know who we were. that was the end of us. The guilt was a poison that seeped into everything. We blamed Kevin, and he hated himself more than we ever could. But we also blamed ourselves. We were all there. We all took the tab. The bond we thought was unbreakable was actually incredibly fragile. The shared trauma didn't bring us closer. It was a constant, screaming reminder of our monumental stupidity, of a night that had cost our friend his future. Our group just dissolved in a quiet, toxic wave of shame and finger-pointing. We never went camping again. We barely even spoke again. I was 6 months into a 2-year probation sentence, and it was hell. Not the community service or the check-ins with my PO. It was the drug tests. Every week, I had to piss in a cup. And the thought of failing and going back to jail kept me clean. But the boredom was suffocating. All I wanted to do after a long day was get high, the way I always had. I just wanted to smoke a bowl and turn my brain off for an hour. But I couldn't. The craving was a constant, itchy feeling under my skin that wouldn't go away. I was driving home from work one day, just stewing in that feeling, when I passed a head shop. The windows were covered in neon signs for pipes and grinders. I remembered seeing little foil packets of herbal incense and potpourri on their counters years ago. Legal highs. The thought hit me like a lightning bolt. It was a loophole. It had to be. If they were selling it legally in a store, it couldn't show up on a drug test for THC. It was the perfect answer. My addict brain immediately latched onto it as a genius idea. I pulled into the parking lot and walked inside. The place smelled overwhelmingly of patchouli incense and dust. A skinny guy with long hair and a tie-dye shirt was behind the counter, scrolling on his phone. He looked up, bored. I tried to act casual, like I was just browsing. I walked past the glass cases full of intricate bongs and cheap metal pipes, making my way to the counter where all the little packets were. I asked him, trying to keep my voice steady, if any of that stuff was like, for real. He gave me a knowing smirk. "Can't sell it for human consumption, man," he said, in that rehearsed way. "But what you do with it is your business." He pointed to a bright red packet with a grinning clown on it. The brand name was Joker. "This is the most popular one," he said. "It's not weed, so you're clean on a test. It's totally legal." That was all I needed to hear. The part of my brain that should have screamed danger was completely silent. All I heard was clean on a test and legal. I bought a 3-gram packet for $20. I walked out of that shop clutching it in my hand, feeling like I had just gotten away with something brilliant. The second I was back in my apartment, I deadbolted the door. I felt a rush of relief and a smug sense of victory. I had done it. I had found the perfect workaround. My own secret key to getting high without any consequences. I sat on my couch and ripped open the red Joker packet. I dumped a little of the contents into my palm. It didn't look like weed at all. It was just a dry, flaky mix of chopped up leaves and plant matter, almost like potpourri. But it had a weird, damp, chemical smell to it. I grabbed the cheap little glass pipe I'd bought at the head shop. I wasn't trying to get blasted out of my mind. I just wanted to feel something, anything, to take the edge off. I told myself I'd be smart about it. I pinched just a tiny amount of the stuff and packed it carefully into the small bowl. Just a tester. I leaned back, put the pipe to my lips, and sparked the lighter. The stuff ignited instantly, going up in a quick, bright flare. It tasted horrible, not earthy and familiar like weed, but bitter and chemical, like burning plastic. I almost coughed it all out right there, but I forced myself to hold it in. I sat there on the couch, holding that acrid smoke in my lungs, waiting for the gentle, manageable buzz to settle in. I was expecting a little wave of relaxation, a simple, easy high that would let me sleep and, most importantly, wouldn't show up on a drug test. I let the smoke out in a thin, gray stream, and I waited. The gentle wave of relaxation never came. The easy high never arrived. There was no buzz at all. What happened instead was instantaneous. It wasn't a feeling. It was an event. It was like a circuit breaker in my spine had been flipped. A dull, final thud echoed through my entire nervous system, and everything just stopped. My head didn't slump. My body didn't go slack. I just froze. I was sitting upright on my couch, my eyes open, staring at the coffee table. The cheap little pipe was still held loosely in my right hand. But it wasn't my hand anymore. I was in my head, looking out through my eyes like they were windows. I told my fingers to uncurl from the pipe. Nothing happened. I watched my own hand, waiting for it to obey, but it just stayed there, a pale, unmoving thing. A surge of cold panic shot through me. I tried again. I put all my focus into my right index finger, screaming at it in my mind. Wiggle. Just wiggle. It didn't move. The panic turned into pure, brain-shattering terror. I tried to stand up. I tried to throw myself off the couch. I tried to scream. My mind was a whirlwind of frantic commands, screaming and pushing and fighting. But it was like all the wires had been cut. My throat didn't tighten. My lips didn't part. No sound came out. No muscle twitched. I was completely, totally, and utterly paralyzed. I could see the room. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator. I could feel the rough fabric of the couch against my back. But I was buried alive inside my own flesh. I was a fully conscious, terrified mind, trapped inside a body that had just become a statue. Time started to warp. A minute felt like an hour. An hour felt like a year. The only thing that moved was the second hand on the cheap wall clock, each tick echoing in the dead silence of the room like a hammer blow. Tick. Another second I was trapped. Tick. Another second closer to... what? I tried to blink. I couldn't. My eyes were locked open, staring at the wood grain of my stupid coffee table until it felt like it was burned onto my retinas. The initial shock had worn off and was replaced by a kind of cold, methodical terror. I tried to go through a checklist in my mind. Move your left foot. Nothing. Shrug your shoulders. Nothing. Breathe deeper. My breathing stayed shallow, automatic, completely outside of my control. I was a passenger in a machine that had just been turned off. Then a new thought, colder and heavier than the rest, settled into my mind. I thought to myself, this is it. I'm dead. I wasn't dying. I was already dead. That puff of smoke hadn't just paralyzed me, it had killed me instantly. And this was the afterlife. This was what being a ghost was. You just stay where you died, looking out of your own dead eyes, watching the world go on without you. I was a prisoner inside my own corpse. But what if I wasn't dead? A second, even worse idea wormed its way in. What if I was alive, but the chemical had done something permanent? What if it had just dissolved the connection between my mind and my body? A stroke. A man-made chemical stroke. I had permanently broken myself. I wasn't a ghost. I was a living consciousness, trapped in a useless shell of flesh and bone. I was going to sit here on this couch, fully aware, until I died of dehydration days from now. This was no longer a drug high gone wrong. This was an eternity of silence and stillness, with nothing but my own screaming thoughts for company. The terror was so immense, so absolute, that it became its own quiet, still thing. There was no escape. There was no way to signal for help. No one was coming. I was just a statue on a couch, and I was going to be here, like this, forever. I don't know how long I was sitting there, a statue on my own couch. 5 minutes? An hour? It felt like a geological age. My thoughts had cycled from pure terror to a kind of resigned horror. This was it. This was my hell. A silent, conscious observer, trapped in a body that had become my tomb. The clock on the wall kept ticking, each click a little hammer driving a nail into my coffin. The sound was the only proof that time was still moving, even if I wasn't. Then I felt something, a twitch, in the little finger of my left hand. It was an impossibly small spasm, barely perceptible, but it was like a lightning strike in the stillness. A signal from a world I thought I had left forever. Hope, so sharp and painful it felt like another form of terror, exploded in my chest. I focused every ounce of my will on that finger. Move. Please, just move again. Slowly, agonizingly, it worked. The finger curled, then uncurled, then the one next to it. It was like watching a frozen river thaw, a crack appearing here, a trickle of water there. Over the next eternity, feeling began to creep back into me. A pins and needles sensation crawled up my arms and legs. I could finally force a ragged, shallow breath, then another, deeper one. I slumped forward, my head dropping into my hands, my whole body shaking uncontrollably. The cheap glass pipe fell from my numb fingers and shattered on the floor. I just stayed there, curled into a ball on the couch, gasping for air, overwhelmed with the sheer, violent relief of being able to move again. As feeling returned, so did a wave of sickness. I stumbled to the bathroom and threw up, just dry heaving over and over. When I was done, I walked back into the living room, grabbed the red Joker packet from the table, and threw it in the trash. I went back and swept up the pieces of the pipe and threw them away too. I never wanted to see it again. For the rest of the night, I just paced my apartment, touching the walls, flexing my hands, constantly reminding myself that I was back inside my own body. The experience left a scar that a drug test could never see. For months, I would jolt awake in the middle of the night with the ghost sensation of paralysis. A cold dread washing over me that I was trapped again. I'd have to get up and walk around just to prove to myself that I could. That single puff, my brilliant loophole, had given me a taste of being buried alive. It was a punishment so perfectly tailored to my crime that it felt biblical. I wanted to cheat the system and turn my brain off for an hour. Instead, the universe showed me what it was like to be a fully active mind with no brain to control. My story isn't a one-off. It's a recurring theme with different brand names and different chemicals. I thought I was finding a clever exception to the rule, a legal and safe way to get what I wanted. But that's the deadliest illusion there is. It's the same lie sold to the college kid who's promised pure empathy in a capsule, but gets psychosis in a bag. It's the same lie sold to the pre-med student who just needs to kill the pain to pass one test and gets a fake pill that kills his future instead. It's the lie whispered to the professional who thinks his high-priced powder is a clean tool for success, only to find out it's cut with something that teaches his body to eat itself alive. It's the lie told to a group of friends who trust a darknet vendor, thinking they've secured a pure and magical rite of passage, only to watch one of them seize in the dirt. Everyone thinks they're the one who found the loophole. The trusted dealer, the prescription bottle, the legal packaging, the reputable online source. But there is no quality control in the shadows. There is no Better Business Bureau for drug dealers. The label on the packet is a lie. The promise of purity is a marketing tactic. You are not a customer they value. You are a risk they are willing to take. Every time you take that shortcut, you are gambling with your mind, your body, and your future. And the only thing you can be certain of is that you are the only one who will have to live with the consequences when the gamble doesn't pay off.